Hello, today we are going to try something a little bit different and we are going to be working on hot press watercolor paper. So I realized that I tend to basically just use cold press exclusively, and I have been lately really into experimenting and trying different things. So today we are going to experiment on hot press paper. Well, it's not really an experiment. I've used it before, but it's not my preferred paper of choice. But we are going to do that today. And we are going to paint a really pretty little illustration of a little scene in a jar. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I've already taped my paper down to the page. And I'm going to take my ruler and start the beginnings of a jar. So I'm just going to start the sides, and I'm going to attempt to make them as even as possible. So let's start here. Let me turn my ruler around so that I can work in inches. And I'm going to start here. Let's start at 6.5 to 2. Feel free to do this however you'd like, whatever dimensions you like. I just like to start with a ruler just to make the sides as straight as possible. And then we are going to curve the bottom, and we're just going to eyeball it, curve the bottom, and have it curve out just a little. And again, we're just eyeballing it. Have a little kneaded eraser handy, or any eraser that you choose that works well. I always find that kneaded erasers work really well on watercolor paper. So we have rounded out the bottom, and now we are going to round out the top. I'm going to start somewhere here to round out the top of it. So we're going to round this out, and we're going to do the same on this side. And it does not have to be perfect. It just has to be. We are not aiming for perfection. As you can see here, these are completely different, but it's okay. We're going to keep going until we find a shape that works. And I'm going to erase any errant lines. And now we are going to do the little bottle top. Just give it a nice little neck. And I'm going to take my ruler once again, put it across the top, and we're going to do the bottle. It's going to be like a screw-in lid. I'm going to make it fairly big. And then we are going to round it out. We're going to round out both lines, but I really wanted to give me a guide. So that's why I put those straight lines in. But this is just a guide. We're going to round it out. Round it out. And then we are going to round the top. And I don't think I'm going to make it quite as big as that. So we're going to round the bottom out. And then I want to be able to see a little bit of the top. So I'm going to kind of round that out as well. And erase any errant markings that we have. And I'm going to also add a couple of little, let's see if, I don't think I have a mason jar handy. But if you see the top, the lid of a mason jar usually has some ridges along the top of it. So we're going to add those ridges in now. Nothing too fancy. Remember, it's sort of three-dimensional, so we're having it poke out a little on the sides. And we are adding in those ridges. Also, this looks a little funky. It looks like a pill bottle, so I'm going to bring the lid out, the top of it out just a little. Erase any of those straight lines. And again, on this side, so that the top of the bottle is flush with the edge of the bottleneck. And I'm going to attempt to make this side even with this one. But you know what? If it doesn't work, it's okay. It's okay. I'm also going to give this another ridge. Let's just make this a little bit, the cap a little bit bigger. All right. So there we have our bottle, or like our mason jar. And in this mason jar, we are going to add a little mountain scene to it. So aside from like regular paints, I'm going to be using Lime Yours, which is a neon, just to give the background a little bit of oomph, you know, just a little something. Now, when I draw or when I paint, I usually don't sketch out you know what I want. But I think this time I might break the rules just a little and do just kind of like a little sketch of some mountains and things and see how it looks. So we're going to do a couple of mountain ranges. They don't have to be perfect. Remember, this is just a sketch. So they don't have to be perfect. And then we can add maybe one down here. So I am going to go for a smaller brush than I usually use. So I'm going to use a size 4 round brush, and I am going to be using a couple of colors, a couple of blues. Feel free to pick any blues you want. I'm going to go with my Galaxy palette that I know and love, and I am going to start with a little bit of peacock blue along the top of the bottle. And I'm not going to bring it all the way down. I am going to kind of merge this peacock blue in with the Lime Yours. So I just added a little bit of water and I'm dragging that down. And I don't remember what is the brand of this hot press paper that I'm using, because I have a bunch of loose paper that I've been using to make sketchbooks with, and I haven't been keeping track of all of the scraps. So this is one of the scraps that I have used. So I'm just taking my time and I am adding in some blue, and I'm just right now bringing it down with some water, plain water. And I am going to continue just adding water in at the bottom. And now I'm going to take some of that Lime Yours, and I am going to start bringing it in from the bottom up. As you can see, there is a line across the middle of the paper there, and that's because this is again a piece of scrap paper, and I had folded the paper in half. Let's move this light out of the way. I folded the paper in half, and you know, it causes little ridges in the paper, but we're gonna go with it. There's not much we can do about that now. So I'm going with the Lime Yours, and we're just adding it into the bottom. To that Lime Yours, I'm just going to add a little bit of Viridian along the top of it. And this is Viridian by Magello Mission Gold, as was the Peacock Blue. Okay, so I'm adding a little bit of Viridian, and now I am going to blend those two together. And I just wanted to give the lime yours a little bit of a punch. Don't worry if it gets into the top of your mountains. That is not a problem because we are going to work with that. I'm pushing some of this color up and out of that ridge. And now I'm going to go back in with the peacock blue, and I'm going to kind of blend that in along this edge with the green. Try to make that as seamless as possible. You'll see that I'm adding a lot of peacock blue along the top and not as much along the bottom. And I'm going just to continue blending these in. You can bring some of it in, bring some of the blue down, some of the green up. Have them blend in nicely. And now I'm going to take a higher concentration of that peacock blue and just add just a couple of streaks here and there. Nothing too drastic, but a couple of streaks. Give it some texture and just kind of make it look, you know, like there's some movement in the skies and the clouds and nothing too fancy. Let's bring some of it down, some of it up. Play around with it until it, until it looks like something you are satisfied with. So that's going to be my sky. I'm going to leave that to dry. And now I'm going to go in with some Payne's Gray and start working on the mountains. I'm going to start with a very light concentration of Payne's Gray. And actually, I think I'm going to change brushes. I'll go up to size 8, to a size 8 round, since I'm going to be covering a lot of area with this first application. It's still wet. That's not a problem. I don't mind at all. I'm going to start just adding in a watered down Payne's Gray along the bottom of the mountains. And again, it's a little bit wet on top. If it gets up into the paint, that's okay. We'll define the edges a little bit later. Okay, I'm going to go back to my little brush for a second, and I'm going to bring in some of that green into the gray of the mountains. So I'm going to take my Lime Yours, and I am just going to water that down a bit. And I'm going to add it to the gray on top here, just to give it a hint of that color from the sky. I'll go back with my Payne's Gray and blend those bottom edges in. So you're just going to get a hint of that green in with the gray. You don't want to take it overboard, so you don't have to put too much in. But there we go. And now we're going to wait for this to completely dry and then move on to the next step. All right, I'm going back to my smaller brush, and we are going back in to work a little bit more on the mountains. So we have our first layer of, well, the first layer of all of the mountains done, but I want to add a second layer over the entire thing. just to kind of like bring it all together and to bring in to marry the green with the Payne's gray just a little bit better. And now that it's all dry, it could be defined a little bit more. So that is going to work really well. All right, we're going to let that layer dry and then move on to the next. Okay, now that that layer is dry, we are going to start working on the second set of mountains there. And I'm again using my bigger brush. I'm adding in a little bit more paint to the puddle, and we are going in on that second mountain, and we're working all the way down to the bottom. All the way down to the bottom. And now this is gonna dry and then we'll come back to it. Okay, next layer of mountain, and you guessed it, we're adding even more paint to the palette, and we are painting in a third mountain. Okay, let this one dry now. All right, now we're going to do a little something that we hardly ever do, but I wanted to do like some glowing circles, like just glowing around the outside of the jar. So I'm just going to draw some circles. They don't have to be fancy. Just draw circles. Again, they don't have to be fancy. Just draw a couple of circles. Make them big, make them small. As many, as little as you would like. Just a ton of little circles. Okay, and now what we're going to do is use two colors. So I think I am going to go and I'm going to go in with a little bit of Anthraquinone blue and some Hansa yellow. Yes, but my Hansa yellow is a little bit orange, so let me clean that off first. I don't want any orange in this piece, although it's glowing light, right? So it might be fine. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to use our blue and we are going to start painting the background. Okay, and we're going to work fairly quickly. I'm not 100% familiar with how quickly this paper dries, so we're going to work fairly quickly. So you're going to see here that I went around the circle, and I'm going to go in with a smaller brush, and I'm going to wet just around that circle, just around the outer edge of the circle, and I'm going to go in with my Hansa yellow and add that in and have it meet gently the blue. Ooh. Now we're just going to pat around it, and then I'm going to go back in and add some more. Just going to wet the edges a little to kind of have it meet the blue. And we're just going to have a nice little glow there. And now we're going to continue working. Try to go around. Okay. carefully around your jar. Careful as can be. And continue. So I see that this paper dries pretty quickly. So I just added a bit of water there. So it dries pretty quickly. So that means that we're gonna have a couple of like the hard water lines. And you know what? That's okay with me. I am trying my best to let loose lately and not worry too much about, you know, the little details. Oops. Okay. So now we're going to continue going around that, and we are going to do the same thing that we did before. I'm going to wet a little bit of the outer edges. I put way too much water there. And I'm going to add in the yellow. I'm going to dry off my brush and just a little bit, not too much, and then bring that yellow around. And now I'm just going to dab it a little bit and then add a bit more yellow. All right, and now I'm going to continue on down. We want to keep this area wet here, so I'm just going to add some more, a little puddle of water there. And now we are going to continue making our way down. Down the paper with our blue. And we're going around any circles you drew. Going to add a little bit of a puddle here so it doesn't dry on me. And again, we're going to continue with the same technique. I'm going to wet this a little. I'm going to add the hands of yellow. I'm going to clean off my brush, dry it just a little, and then blend those two in together. If you get blue on your brush like I just did, just clean it off. And this one doesn't look like it needs much of a dab because the blue and the yellow didn't mix in that much. So we're just swirling that around. And then I'm going to continue on with my blue. And now I'm going to add a puddle here, and now I'm coming over here to the side. What I really want to do right now is give it another pass because I am not liking the way that it dried. So we're gonna do a little experiment and really hope and cross our fingers and hope that it works. But I'm gonna give it another pass with the Anthraquinone Blue. And yeah, we're gonna see how this goes, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I am just going to go in. I just washed my brush off. There's no paint on it. Hopefully there was paint on it. I lied. Okay, hopefully there's no paint on it. And I am just going to wet this part here and then go around it. All right. So the blue will just kind of seep in there. And I'm just going to give it a second layer and hope that I didn't mess it up. You are here for my experiment. Weirdly enough, I really like the way that looks, so I think I may leave it. I don't know yet. We'll see. All right, I'm going around. Actually, I'm not gonna leave it. That's messing with the aesthetics. So all right, there we go. All I did was dab the middle. All right, once again, I'm going to get rid of any excess in the middle. That was just plain water, and now I'm going around one more time. And once I hit that watery spot there, I'm just going to just kind of let it flow in. I'm not going to do too much with that. Just kind of let it flow in. All right. Water. And back to the Anthraquinone Blue. For layer number 2. I don't know what it's going to look like until it completely dries, so let's just hope that it looks good. I didn't put enough water along the edges of this. So let me do that now. Okay. All right, water here. And back to the Anthraquinone Blue as we are darkening the background up with layer number 2. And we are going to continue this way until we make our way around the paper. Now we're going to allow this to dry and see actually how it dries. Let's hope I didn't make a mistake. Okay, so the verdict is in. I love the way it looks. I'm really happy that we went in with a second layer. So the next step is going to be adding in details to the background, to the jar, and then working on the lid. All right, now it's time for us to paint the lid, and I'm going to use the same Payne's Gray that I used for the mountains. And again, I'm gonna go in with a nice light layer of the Payne's grain. And I'm going to paint the entire jar lid, and then we'll work on the details in a bit. So for now, just paint it in a nice light layer, and then we'll get back to it. Okay. Oh, and of course, right now the sun decides that it wants to like invade my space. The next thing we're going to do now is work on the mountains just a little bit to give it just a little bit more like character and texture to it. So I'm going to take a bit of my, excuse me, a bit of my Lime Yours. And I'm just going to put a little bit on my palette. We're not going to use a whole lot of this, but just put a little bit on my palette. And I'm going to mix that with a bit of Viridian, and I'm going to take this mixture and dilute it a bit. That's a little bit too too dark, but I'm going to use this mixture in the mountains to create some ridges. And when you do this, remember that you want to make sure that the ridges all are in the same side of the mountain. So all of them are coming off of this side of the mountain. And so it's just very lightly adding in these little ridges here. And then I'm going to go back in with a little bit of the Payne's Gray and add a bit more texture to the mountain. You could mix some of that in with the green. There's like, ooh, my hand just, there's no like rule to follow here. So I'm going to add in a little bit to the green, and I'm just adding in a bit of this for a bit of texture. And we're gonna leave it at that. And now we're gonna make sure that this is completely dry before we move on. Now what we're going to do while the top is still drying, because that's still drying for me, it's still a little wet, is start adding some details to the jar. Okay, so you're gonna grab your white medium. As always, I use Copic Opaque White. Feel free to use whatever white medium that you enjoy, be it, I don't know, gouache, acrylic. Watercolor is pretty light, white watercolor, so you know, I mean, if you want to go for a lighter effect, then yeah, use that white watercolor. I'm going to grab a bit of a bigger brush. So I think I'm going to go in with my size 8. And these are one of those times where I tell you to be bold in what you're doing. Be bold in your strokes, because you are going to put a highlight straight down the side of your jar. So these are one of those times where I tell you, be bold and be brave. You may feel like you will ruin your piece, but you won't. Lean into it. All right, I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to add just a little stroke of white here, and make sure that you're curving it. Let me add a bit of water. My brush is a bit dry. Make sure that you're curving your line and then go straight down. And I didn't put enough white, or water on my brush. So we're gonna do that again, and we're gonna go straight down. You can vary your stroke lines, so some of them can be thick and some of them can be thin. And this is not a time for perfection, so just go straight down. Okay, and now we are going to go to the other side, and I like to put a little highlight. Let me turn this around so I can get a better handle of it. I like to put a little highlight here on the corner, and it tapers off on top, and then on the side here, and it tapers off. So we have that highlight. We're gonna do several highlights. We're gonna do a couple of little lines at the bottom here. Okay, and let's do a highlight. How about a little watered down highlight? So we're gonna water this down a bit. And then we're gonna do a little bit of a watered down highlight here around the jar lid, and maybe even right here. And again, these are highlights, so they don't have to be perfect at all. I'm gonna go switch now to a smaller brush. I'm gonna go back to my size 4. And we're gonna do a couple of finer highlights. And let me turn my paper again. So I'm gonna do a couple of finer highlights around here. And again, they don't have to be perfect. You can play around with them. They don't have to be straight lines. You can make different little shapes and have fun with it. You should be having fun with all of it anyway. And I think I'm going to put a highlight. Let's wet this a bit. I think I'm going to put a highlight somewhere over here. And I'm going to make this one like a little shaped highlight. Try to not make the edges so stiff. Okay, perfect. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to line the jar in the white, but I'm going to do it really extra fine. So I'm going to grab a size 0 liner brush, and if you want to skip this step, feel free to. You can leave your jar as is, or if you wanted to use like a gel pen instead of a brush to give you better control, feel free to do that. I'm going to use a brush because either way, with a gel pen or with a brush, trying to do such small lines, it's still going to be a little bit difficult for me with my shaky hands, but we're going to attempt it. And the key to combating those shaky hands is to take really small strokes. So don't try to attempt like a really long line, because that might not work. It could, but it might not. So I am going to just do really small strokes, and that will help you along. And remember to keep your brush wet, because that will help with the gliding of the bristles on the brush. Now that we have that down, I'm going to take a little bit of the white and we're going to add it to the center of all of your little glowy glows. That is the official word, the little glowy glows. And we're just going to do like just a little spiral. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure your brush is not too wet. If you wanted to blend that out, feel free to. I think I'm going to leave mine as is. I don't think I'm going to blend it out, but you can. I want to give this a little like whimsical look. And if you blend it out, all you have to do is just add a little bit of water to the edges to blend it into the yellow. Well, this one is sort of blended out, so let me show you how to do that now instead of just telling you blend it out. All right, so I'm going to dry my brush just a little, and I'm going to take this around the edges and just blend them into the yellow. And now I feel like since I did that one, I need to do all of them. So that's what we're going to do. I put too much water on that one. So I'm going to blend that into the yellow. Let me add a little bit more white to the middle. And same over here. Add a little bit more white to the middle. Dry your brush off a little and blend those white edges out so they blend seamlessly into the yellow. Let's blend this one out just a little bit more. And we'll do that with a couple of the other ones. And then, whoops, let's add that there, and blend. One of the key things to blending is that when you start picking up the color underneath, it is time to clean your brush off and dry it a bit more, and then continue. So once that color starts being deposited on your brush, that's when you know you have to start cleaning that brush off. Okay, now I'm going to grab this paper that I have here, and I think I'm going to add some splatter to the pieces here, the background, and I'm just going to cover my jar so that I don't get any on it. And I'm going to take this nice and slow and a little bit meticulous so that I don't get any on the inside of the jar. And here we go. And I'm not gonna go too crazy. You all know how much I like my splatter, but I'll keep it, I'll keep it simple this time. It'll be a little bit tricky here, but we haven't really painted the lid, so we'll survive if a little bit of white gets on it. Okay. And now if you did get some on your lid, since we haven't really painted it, you could just, dab, dab, dab. Make sure that the white splatter is dry. And now I'm going to go in with a higher concentration of the Payne's Gray, and I am going to do a couple of lines. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to leave a little highlight at the top, very top of the lid, and we're going to paint the top of the lid. And we're coming down to just about the first ridge that we put in this top or in this lid. So I'm leaving a little space along the top here, and that's just gonna be like the highlight. I'm going to just I'm just gonna plop in some color. This is still Payne's Gray. Just gonna plop that in. And then we are going in. Actually, I think I'm going to take this liner brush for this. And with this liner brush, I am going to carefully add a little line with that first ridge, trying to leave a space in between what we just painted, so the top of the lid, and that first ridge. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to outline all of the ridges. It doesn't have to be perfect again. It just has to be. And now I'm taking that Payne's Gray and I am going to add some color in. I forgot to dry my brush off here. Add some color in to the sides and kind of let that color seep in to the inside, just diluting it a bit, just trying to give it like a natural highlight, and just keep the sides as dark as possible. So you can just plop in some color and let that color get dragged along the wet areas. And you see here I'm kind of tapering off that color while keeping the ends here nice and dark. And I'm just tapering off the color as it gets closer to the other side of the jar. And I'm just adding on the other side just a hint of color. We don't want it to be too dark. And we're going to keep it nice and simple. So we built in our highlights. We don't have to do anything else to that because we built in the highlights as we were working on it. So you don't have to add any white or anything to it. You can if you want to. I'm looking at it now and the poor lid looks so tiny compared to the rest of the bottle. So apparently my perspective has been way off with this one. And with that, we are done. If you wanted to add some more highlights or anything to your jar, feel free to do that now. If you wanted to make, the highlights a bit bigger, if you wanted to make them a little bit more pronounced, you can feel free to do that here. Like, let's play around with them a bit. You can keep them simple. You can add more to them. You can play around with them and just kind of enjoy just messing around with them. And with that, our tutorial is done. Wait, actually, no, it can't be done. We haven't even taken the tape off. What is going on with me here? Let's take the tape off before I call this done. And I mean, you don't even have to put mountains. You could put completely different scenery inside of your jar if you wanted to, like, do a cute little illustration. Just anything you want. It doesn't even have to be the mountains. But I really just wanted to show you kind of like the step-by-step process that you take when you're building a piece like this. Also, I wanted to try out the Hotpress watercolor paper with like an entire piece. So okay, now I can say that with that final piece, we are done. I hope that your jar comes out better than mine. Mine is really bottom heavy and the top looks really dinky, but I'm sure that you're gonna be much better at that than I am. I hope you enjoy this and I'll see you for the next tutorial.